Hello, my name is Lee Taylor, and I really like to knit, so much so that some of my friends call me the Knitwit. I hope you enjoyed today's video and possibly even learned something. So let's get started. In the introduction, I mentioned that I really like to knit. So before we go any further, I would like to talk about my knitting background and how I got to where I am today. So in about 2013, maybe a little bit sooner, Mom had decided she wanted to learn how to do crochet. And she'd gone to a few people in the church and asked, and she took lessons, and they were all very good crocheters, but they weren't exactly good teachers. They knew how to do something, but not exactly how to explain how to do something. So for her, crochet fell by the wayside. Then a few years later, we were at the library, and she looked up a how to knit video, and all they happened to have was for children. And it was very basic, find 2 sticks in the yard and some string, and a cute little rhyme on how to cast on, how to knit, simple things like that. And she had that down, and that worked fine. However, when she started her first big project, the instructions once again were written well, but it just wasn't, she couldn't quite grasp what was going on and what needed to happen. So I stepped in, looked at it, figured out how to do it, and explained it to her in a completely different way. So she was off knitting, went to the local yarn shop, bought more supplies, and I set down my needles for what I thought was the end of my journey. Well, a few years later, she got stuck on a pattern. Once again, I read it, explained it in a different way, and she was off once more. Well, this time, I did not set down my needles. I started knitting on a scarf, and then I was completely hooked once I had a project of my own. Fast forward to present day, I knit, and she doesn't crochet or either. Now, Mom is a very smart woman. It's not that she couldn't understand, couldn't grasp it. She just wasn't a knitter or a crocheter. She liked other activities. And so she was off doing that. I'm off knitting, and that is where we are today. Now that I've discussed my background, I'd like to talk about what this channel is and what it could grow into. So the primary purpose of this is just to document my knitting in a way that I can easily share with friends and family. And I love family history, and I love the stories of people. So the ability to record something that later generations of family can look back on and see and hear me is very valuable to me. So first of all, it is to document and to share. It may grow into a couple of how-to videos mixed in. I haven't quite decided yet, but I do want to talk about projects from start to finish. I would like to discuss how I go about picking my particular projects, what tools I usually use versus how that's slowly adapting and changing into something else, and potentially a few other mysterious things that we'll get into later. So if you're a knitter like I am, who likes just mindless knitting, not have to stare at their work, pick up your needles, grab some yarn, and sit back as we go on this adventure together. First off, we have a pair of socks. I've already knit the mate, and now I will show you in the overhead how I'm working on the second sock. This is my sock project. I'm calling it the blueberry socks because the yarn has a very much of a blueberry feel with purples, dark blues, a bit of a turquoisey aqua. I just get a blueberry vibe from it. The pattern is No Swatch Any Yarn Socks by Ida Maria Tiska, I believe is how it's pronounced. The yarn is Online Super Sock 6-ply. It's a German yarn. It is discontinued, unfortunately. The colorway is 2397, not an imaginative name. I am using a 40-inch circular needle and using magic loop to knit these, and it is a US2 size needle, which would be a 2.75 millimeter, using a rounded barn toe. Then I will be using a German short row heel, a 2x2 ribbed leg, because I like it tighter around my ankles, a twisted cable stitch cuff, and then a very stretchy bind off. My stitch markers, if you'll notice, are different colors, and each one means something specific. The light blue just means the start of round. The gold is where the pattern changes. So for example, I finished the toe, so there's a marker there, and then there will be one when I finish the foot, and so on and so forth. The yellow marks when I have knit 20 rows, and that is used to keep track of my round count, but also to measure against the other sock. The silver marker marks each day's progress. And if you notice, there's something unusual about the tail. It comes out the middle of the sock rather than off on one of the edges. And I do that just so I don't get it confused with the working yarn when I'm knitting on the close to the toe. I just thread the tail through a needle and just poke it right down through the middle, and then I know that that is not the yarn that I should be working with. This sock toe, to get the required stitch count that I need, and using my gauge, it took 22 rounds of knitting, which ended up being 920 stitches. Socks are the projects that I use when I am away from the house to knit, because it's the smallest and easy and just easy to take out and put away. So hopefully this sock should progress very quickly. So here is the sock toe as it is right now. Now let me show you what the sock turns into. Here is the sock toe attached to the foot, the German short row heel, the 2x2 leg, and the twisted stitch cuff. And this is how that sock looks. Now, I have not washed it yet. I have just put it on this form. I did not want to wash and block until I had both done at the same time, so I could make sure they're blocked to the same size. But now you can see why I call this the blueberry socks. It has a vague hint of a blueberry feeling to it. Here is the last update for this week on the sock, the blueberry socks. And if you remember, this is where I was when we seen it last. But I had an appointment to go to, and so I took this with me and I started working on the foot, and I'll just show you. That is correct. I got a bunch done. Pull this back up here where we can see the whole thing. Now remember, each yellow marker is 20 stitches. So for the foot section, which I start measuring here at this gold, I need 54 rows. I have 41 rows, so I am almost done with the foot. Then I just have the heel turn, the cuff, or the leg, and then the cuff. This sock should be done very, very soon. I've reorganized the pattern in which I knit projects, so this should be done very, very soon. Now, when I talk about rows, let me zoom in here so I can show you what I mean. Bear with me. Okay, come down here to the lighter color. So if you look at these V's here, see that little V? That is one stitch. This marker's through the leg of one stitch. So that is one stitch. So when I say I need 54 rows, I need a column, which is this right here, of 54 stitches. Now a row actually runs this way, just like a spreadsheet. A row and a column. But when you say you're counting rows or rounds, if you're knitting in the round, I always say rows. It's just easier for me. When you say you're counting rows, you're counting up. So I'm very excited with the amount of progress on the blueberry socks. And like I said, hopefully this will be done very soon. Wish me luck. Second off, we have a project that I am very excited about. It is my first ever cardigan. Now, I'm not going to show all of the pieces of Yerba, Yerba, because I've done pictures and updates on that, so I didn't see a need to do that. But I can tell you a little bit more about it now. The pattern is called LiMiT Cardigan by Susan Mills Knits. I began this on March the 1st, 2022. I'm using a US 8, which would be a 5mm, using my favorite Addy circular knitting needles. It is using yarn Malabrigo yarn Rios, which is a worsted weight, and it's a superwash merino, very soft, got a little bit of a sheen to it, not and springy. It's been a fun yarn to knit with. It is what I would call a tonal. There's different, shades of greens and a bit of a brown. It's not speckled. It's not variegated. I would just stick it with a tonal yarn. It is a worsted weight in the color name Yerba. So first off, I will show you the pocket. Now, stockinette has a tendency to curl, and I'll show you what I mean. It's easier to see on the back side first. So using my handy dandy yarn wand, I can show you what I'm talking about. So if you notice this edge here, which is called the selvage edge, it wants to curl pretty sharply. Whereas this edge up here and this edge down here wants to curl. Now this doesn't look like it wants to curl because the undersides are curled. I mean, that's just naturally what it wants to do, but when those are flattened out, that wants to curl up. And the reason for that, and this is going to sound weird, when you do a knit stitch in stockinette and then you purl on the other side, so when you do a knit, the wrong side of it shows a purl. When you do a purl, the wrong side of it shows a knit. However, the shape of a knit stitch, more than just the little V, and the shape of a purl stitch, more than just the little bump, the knit stitch is taller up and down rather than side to side, and the purl stitch is bigger side to side rather than up and down. What that means is this fabric, believe it or not, has more area on this side than this side. I know that sounds really weird, but that's just the fundamentals of knitting. So what happens is the side selvage wants to curl towards the purl, and the bottom and top wants to curl towards the knit. I don't know why that is. I mean, I know that it's because this is a different size than this side, even though it's the same piece of fabric. But I don't know why that all makes it act that way. But either way, this is the pocket. Now, these are what's called live stitches because they are still on the needle, and this was attached to a ball of yarn. And these are called live stitches because you can still knit from them. You could join a new ball of yarn and knit. You'd be purling back across, but you can still work these stitches. And that's for a particular purpose, because we are going to be working these stitches. This bottom and these edges are going to be sewn to the underside of the cardigan, and these top stitches are going to be picked up and knit, or not picked up, they're already picked up, they're going to be knit across, and that will be the right side of the cardigan. So this will be the inside of the pocket. So if it's like this, pocket you'd put your hand in like this. Okay? So this becomes the back side of the pocket, up, and the right side of the cardigan. I can explain better next week. So there's the pocket. Here is what I have been working on. Now, it's taken me a long time to get anywhere in this. My brain's been preoccupied by other projects, but I can give you an idea of what's going on here. So, my daily progress are white stitches, or white markers. My 20 row counts are turquoise. The pattern change is purple. And this yellow one is the 50 row count. So within the purple is where I'm doing something different. This red marker shows where the pattern changed from doing this to this pocket. This is the pocket lining. Let me zoom in a bit here. Let's see, it wants to curl. But it's the pocket lining, and it's hard to see now. But compared to this, hopefully you can see that there's something different going on here. You know what, let me just go get the other front piece, because I have that finished, and I'll show you what I'm talking about with this and about the pocket. Okay, so here is the same piece. You may see a slight indentation here and up here, and that is because the pocket has been sewn in already. So there is what I'm working on the other one. Kind of zoom in a bit so you can kind of see we've got V's and these purl bumps. So we've got knit stitches and purl stitches, and this is ribbing. So it's 2x2 ribbing across the front of the pocket to the midpoint in both directions. And I had 27 stitches, and so you can't do 2x2 if you have 27. You're going to have one stitch left over. The pattern called for 1x1 ribbing, in which case 27 would work fine. But I don't like 1x1 ribbing. I could have done it just for the pocket, but when I get done, I'm going to come down and pick up stitches and knit a hem, and the hem is going to be knit in 2x2. So I wanted this to match the hem. So I went with 2x2 with 3 purl in the middle, which when it's worn, hopefully won't be as noticeable. I mean, it's noticeable now because I just pointed it out. But let me explain the pocket. So right under here is the pocket. Pocket lining is what this is called. That's what that is. So these live stitches, you know, imagine this is laying on top of this, about like this. So you've got all your ribbing, and as you work across this way, you're binding off these stitches, and then you continue working across. Okay? So now you've got live stitches, bound off stitches, live stitches. So on your way back through, you're purling across because you're on the wrong side. So you purl across, and then you start purling into these stitches here and joining it in. So the 27 you bound off for the ribbing, you pick up and knit these 27 off the pocket lining, and then you work back across. Now when you come back on the right side and you're knitting again, you just knit like it's no big deal, and you just knit all the way back across. And so then you have joined in this pocket lining. So this pocket lining of these live stitches, there is no seam. It's all one piece of fabric. Now on the wrong side, I've already sewn this in, so it's, and I used the tail from the pocket lining to sew these in, and I did not do a good job of sewing, and I'm aware of that, and I'm also okay with that because this is the underside. Nobody's going to see this. I just wanted to make sure that it was very strong, and so I very much overkilled. I even, when I got done with the tails, I tied knots in 2 different places, and then over here, when I wove this tail end in more, because it was over here, and I wove it in over here, I frayed it so that way when it's washed and blocked, I'm hoping that that will kind of become a little sticky, and it will just kind of hold on to that. Hopefully it'll be less likely to unravel. I mean, I've wound in the end well enough, it should not unravel, period, but just in case. See, again, you get that curl, so the whole front, what it naturally wants to do is that, even though, let's see if I can get a full shot, even though the whole piece is that wide, it wants to curl up to that. It just wants to turn into a little tube, like a scroll. But once you wash and block, that will relax, and then when you seam it up, you'll have no trouble. So up here we have the part for the neck. Get this out of the way. And here's the underarm. Now up here, you will see that once again, I have live stitches. Let me zoom in on that again. Live stitches. I have live stitches on the complete, this is the shoulder where the seam will be. On the back panel, this is the left front, on the back panel that I knit, the shoulder seams on those are also live, and the reason why is because I will be doing a bit of grafting. No, it's not actually grafting. I apologize. It is a 3-needle bind off, and that's where you're working both stitches together as if they're one from here and one from the back panel. So there's a needle, and then you use another needle to bind off. So 3-needle bind off. And that makes a very nice and sturdy seam. And you need sturdy because in sweaters, especially cardigans, all the weight is held on the shoulders. So you need something that's going to be very strong, otherwise the whole thing is going to want to pull something fierce. So you need something very, very strong, and a 3-needle bind off is perfect for that. So that is the Yerba, Yerba, named in honor of James Bond. Yerba, Yerba. Because the color is Yerba, the pattern is Lee, and I like to do things whimsical. It's a perfect fit. Yerba, of course, meaning herb in South American Spanish. I forget which country now. And they dry and ferment the leaves, and brew it in hot water. It's not a tea because it does not have any tea leaves. It is an herbal drink, which would be a tisane, Tisane. An infusion is what that would be, another name for. And I love tea. I love herbal teas. I love infusions. One of my favorite is what people call peppermint tea. Again, there's no tea in it. It's just peppermint leaves. So when I seen this yarn and loved the color, I loved the olive khaki color. I didn't know about the name at the time. I looked it up later because I was like, that's an interesting name. There's got to be something behind it. And so when I found out about that it was Yerba herbal for an herbal drink, a steeped herbal drink, and the cardigan's name was Lee, I knew it was the perfect fit. And then of course, Malabrigo is out of Uruguay, I believe, is where they do their processing. And so they named their worsted weight yarn Rios, and I'll explain why. So Rios is the Spanish word for river. And down in Paraguay, Bolivia, somewhere in South America. I do not know my South American geography well enough to pinpoint, and I do not remember. There are 4 major rivers. Rios. Well, they wanted a worsted weight yarn, and let me zoom in and I'll explain what the significance of Rios is. So this is the worsted weight yarn, and if we unspin it, untwist it here, you will notice that there are, let's see if I can show it here, there are 4 strands. It's kind of hard to see, but 4 strands. And so they figured that was a very appropriate, since they wanted a worsted weight yarn, and they wanted 4 strands. There you go, now you can see them. They wanted a 4-strand yarn from that area in honor of the 4 main rivers. They named the yarn Rios, and I love that. I love a yarn. I love a story behind something, a significance of naming something, not just necessarily a whimsical name. I do whimsical names a lot, but they always have a particular purpose, the reason for it. Yerba, I just explained. So I love having something significant about the color name or the yarn name, something along those lines. So this is Yerba. I'm excited to get this finished. Hopefully it'll be done by September for my birthday. We'll see. It's taken me a bit longer on this right front than what I had anticipated, so we will see. Next, we have a cardigan that I am knitting in honor of my late grandfather, because I realized that if I had started knitting cardigans sooner, I could have knit one for him and he really would have enjoyed it. So this is in honor of him. This cardigan is from the pattern Loose Line Garter Stitch Jacket by Catherine Ham. I am knitting the large size, and I'm using 2 strands of Lion Brand Pound of Love held together in the color denim, and that is a worsted weight by itself. I'm using a US 10.5 or a 6.5 millimeter to knit it to get the right gauge. And on this one, this is the bottom of the back, so this cardigan is knit in pieces and then seamed together. It is an all garter stitch. However, when I do the front of the hem, I'm going to do a little cuff. I think I'm going to go ahead and do the twisted cable stitch every other rib just for a little added texture. And I think I would like to add a shawl collar to this. This has no particular collar at all. It's just regular old garter stitch. The markers for this one our daily progress are these gold markers here. The red marker is for 20 ridges, which would be 40 rows. And then when the pattern changes, that I will mark with bronze. And up here in the corners, I've got 2 red stitch markers that will show that when I get to the underarm, I will bind off to those markers and then knit on straight. This cardigan is a modified drop shoulder cardigan, so there is very little, if any, shaping. It's just bind off, knit straight up. So it's a very simple pattern in a beautiful yarn. It kind of has a grayish white undertone to the color, and I am very excited. It is a very dense fabric. The pattern called for a bulky weight yarn, but I'm getting the same gauge with this, and I'm actually gone up a needle size, and it's still a very dense yarn, so I can't imagine what the original was. And the original also was a tweed yarn. This is just a regular worsted spun, worsted acrylic yarn. So I'm very excited for how this is progressing. And he was a pastor for about 36 years. And again, this is knit in memory of him. And since he was a pastor, I knit this on Sundays and think about him as I knit it. And it is a beautiful, cherished memory project. I am even more excited to see it moving forward and can't wait to show you more updates as they happen. My next project is a hat that is knit in a very unique way. It is called Thistle Do for a Hat. Now this project was a lot of fun because I knit this hat differently than I normally do. Normally I knit from the cuff and knit that for a distance, then I knit straight in the round so it makes a tube, and then I start doing decreases up to the top, and then when there's 10 stitches I just pull them through and weave in the ends. Well, this one I started from the top and worked increases, so I'm adding the number of stitches rather than working from the bottom and decreasing and taking away stitches. I'm adding stitches and then knit straight and then did ribbing and then bound off on this, and it was nice. It's nice and stretchy. I didn't use the way that is traditionally correct, but I still enjoyed the way it turned out. And I would definitely knit a hat like this again. This is a light fingering weight yarn from Speckled Finch Studios in their Cushy Merino line. And the colorway is called Thistle. Thus the name Thistle Do for a Hat. Now this is my own pattern, but it is inspired by Roxanne Richardson's Technique Tuesdays video, How to Knit a Hat Without a Pattern. So this is a light fingering, but I use what's called the Slingshot Method, which I will explain later on how that all works. But it takes a light fingering, which is a very thin yarn, and makes it act like an Aran or bulky weight, which is a bulky or thick yarn. I used a US 10.5 to knit this circular needle, which would be a 6.5 millimeter needle. And like I said, I'm very happy with how this turned out. I have not washed and blocked it yet, but I knit a similar hat called Can't Hide in the Dark with a yarn very similar to this and wash and block, and it was so soft and actually had a silky feel to it, even though there was no silk in it. So I'm very pleased with how this turned out, and I will demonstrate the Slingshot method next. Okay, so normally when you knit, you take your yarn. In this case, this is the very fine, or the light fingering weight Thistle yarn that I used in the hat. And normally, you'd make your little slip knot, put that on your needle, add your stitches, or cast on stitches. I use the long tail cast on more times than not, because I like the way it works up. I like how stretchy it is. I like the pretty look of it. So normally you would, cast on a number of stitches. I have 6 here, and that's enough for our little explanation. And then you would get your other needle, and you would just knit those stitches like so. Nothing fancy, just knitting some stitches here. I can bring it in a little closer. Yes, my thumb's hiding. I apologize for that. This is an awkward angle to knit. Do it like this. And the yarn wraps around the needle like so. So normally you just knit like that. Well, one of the people I follow on YouTube, Barbara Benson, so shout out to Barbara Benson, she had watched a video on TikTok, and I'm not sure who it was that she was watching. But she explained how to use this what I'm calling the Slingshot Method, and you'll see why here in a bit, of taking this light fingering and using it as a bulky weight. And the way you do that is, let me take this off and frog this out, is you get yarn like this, and you pull it so that way you end up with 3 strands. And this is kind of tricky to do like this. So 3 strands like this, and then you tie your little slip knot in there like you normally would, and you cast on just like you normally would. So yes, there's 3 strands there, but you're going to treat those 3 strands as if there's only one. I'm going to set my other needle down here. So when you do the long tail cast on, you put what's called a slingshot to get started. So that looks like that, which looks like a slingshot. And then you cast on some stitches. There would be 2 stitches, even though there's 3 strands each. That would be 2, and I'm sorry, that would be 3, and we'll stop there. Pull out some of that slack there. Well, my hands would cooperate. Okay, so what you do is you see this little loop right here? There's a strand and then a loop. Well, what you do is you take that strand through that loop like so, and you pull it out and pull and pull and pull and pull and pull until you have a section, and then you have 3 strands again. So then you can pick up your needle, and yes, I only cast on 3 stitches, but that'll be enough to explain. And then you knit with those 3 strands like you cast on. You just treat it as if they were one single strand instead of treating them like they're all 3. That, for whatever reason, was incredibly loose, but you get the idea. And so this is what I'm calling the slingshot method. Now there is a method of when you're spinning yarn, it's a chain ply is what they call it. From what I understand, I am not a spinner, and I have no intentions of trying to learn how to spin. But from what I understand, you take a single, which would be like this. This yarn, let's see if I can get in close and it'll focus in here. There you go. So if you see the yarn, there's some twist in that. Each one of those twists is an individual yarn or strand called a ply. So when they're going to ply this, they have, let's see here, this looks like a, let's see here, we can split this out. Looks like a 4-ply to me. Yeah, 4 plies. And then they take those 4 plies, so from 4 different sources, and they spin those all together. And one of the ways they can do that if they want a 3-ply is if this is a single thread, they can do the exact same way that I'm knitting, but they do it as they're spinning. So they take the single yarn and turn it into a 3-ply. There's a better view of that. I apologize, my camera is not wanting to focus. See if I can fix that here. There we go. See that as it pulls through there. So that's why I'm calling the slingshot, because you have the sideways facing U, and then the strand up top, and that sideways facing just reminds me of a slingshot. And then you knit like that. So that is how I knit my hat Can't Hide in the Dark and Thistle Do for a Hat. My new favorite method of knitting hats. And that hat, the Thistle Do for a Hat, was a 100-gram ball. And I still have 37 grams. So there's still quite a bit of yarn here. So I'm not sure what I want to do with it. I may knit an extremely lacy scarf to go with the hat. But we'll see. We'll just kind of see what happens. So I hope you enjoyed this part and learned something. Up next, we have a shawl that I am currently working on and designing at the same time, and I have called this Shoot for the Moon. This is more than likely going to change multiple times before it is finished. This is the shawl Shoot for the Moon. As I said, this is my own pattern that I'm currently working on. It's not exactly complicated, just garter stitch some yarn overs with a center spine and continue that all the way around. Now these triangles are increased at the same rate, so it may end up more square, where this will come all the way around and be more of a square shape just with an opening. So I'm not sure. I do like this lace edging on this particular one. Now normally when I am knitting a shawl, I do not want it to be this lacy, but this is a project for someone else, and I think the lace adds a nice little bit of just a little bit of something extra. Now this is called Shoot for the Moon. It is knit using Universal Yarns Bamboo Pop, which is a 50% cotton, 50% bamboo, in the colorway Earth Science, color number 222. That's not the dye lot, that's the color code. I am knitting using my favorite knitting needles, Addy, Scacell Rocket Turbo. I like it's a little bit of a sharper point on these. These are a US 7, which is a 4.5 millimeter, and I'm enjoying this, but as of right now it is going in hibernation because I have another project going on, which I will talk about next week. But this is my shawl, Shoot for the Moon. You knit 2 stitches, yarn over, knit to the next marker, yarn over, knit, yarn over, next marker, yarn over, knit, yarn over, so on and so forth to the very last stitch, and you slip the yarn in front and you slip the yarn purlwise. So very simple, just that back and forth, and on the wrong side you just knit everything across. So that is Shoot for the Moon, and I called it that because as of right now it's what's considered a crescent shape. So I'm not sure if it'll stay that way or not, but Shoot for the Moon. Next, we have a very simple scarf that is knit in mostly garter stitch with one unique twist at the end, and I have called this a Bamboozled Scarf. Here we're going to talk about the Bamboozled Scarf. I am using a Clover Takumi US 8, which is a 5 millimeter knitting needle. I believe this is the 8-inch kind. This was one of my very first knitting needles, so it's definitely a favorite, and is part of the reason why this is called a Bamboozled Scarf, because I'm knitting it using bamboo needles. More on that later. I am using Yarn Bee's Bamboo Spun yarn. It was a Hobby Lobby brand. It is now discontinued, and I am so sad to see that I cannot get this anymore. It is very soft. It is a 77-23 blend of bamboo, rayon from bamboo, and 23% nylon. And I love the sheen to it. It's got that little bit of shine. Okay, so now to the scarf. Where all of these yarn tails. It's just a simple garter stitch scarf. And it is 25 stitches wide. This just shows me which is the quote-unquote right side. It's garter, so both sides are the same. But it's just knit all the way across to the very last stitch, and then you bring yarn to the front and slip the last stitch purlwise, which just gives it this nice, neat edge. Kind of a chain, like a crochet chain edge. So this hat was knit, this scarf was knit to be part of a set. And it's the last part to knit of that set. And as you can see here, there's some really cool, the way it's pooling. Almost has a kind of a S shape to it. It's just a really cool little pattern in there. Just happens to be how the yarn comes out. So like I said, that's part of a set. The first piece of it was one of the very first things I ever knit that I still have, I should say. And it is, let me zoom out a bit here. It is a hat. This was before I started giving everything a whimsical name, but I have since named this Shoot. It's a hat. Bamboo shoots. So it was just knit in garter, in a rectangle, seamed up, and as you can, it's a very, very, like I said, one of the first things I did, so the seaming is horrendous. And then you just draw the yarn around the edge. You leave about 3/4 of an inch or so, and you just draw that tight, and that makes this little palm. And I did have to go in, you can still see my finger, but I did go in and tighten that up a bit. So that was the first thing in the set. Then I knit these this spring. I finished, I believe, in April, and these are mitts taken, and it's just 1x1 ribbing with a stockinette thumb, ribbing cuff, somewhat stretchy bind off, not super stretchy, a little bit more snug around the thumb, which was intentional, and the same with the mate. So when I'm all said and done, I will have the mitts, the hat, and the scarf. The hat I always wear in the fall because those are just fall colors. The color name is Bronzed Sky, which I love. I think more of like a fire pit, campfire, something like that. But I do see that this gray in person has a bit of a blue undertone to it, so I can see, that being the sky and the bronzed of the sunset. So back to the knitting needles and the name. So knit on bamboo needles with bamboo yarn. It just made sense that this would be a bamboozled scarf. I'm very excited to get this done for this fall. However, this also is on hibernation for the time being. And again, there's some big projects I'm excited about, so this is going off to the side. I may knit this if I just need some mindless TV knitting. I may come back and work on this, but as of right now, officially it is in hibernation and now is considered a UFO, an unfinished object. If I don't get to it this year, finish of February is right around the corner. I know it's only the end of April, but February is coming.